Hey guys, it's Pelican here and welcome to my Magsorc solo PvP build for the Flames of Ambition patch. This setup also works for small men and BGs, and I'll also be going through some alternative sets you can use. I'll also be focusing more on the CP this time due to the new CP changes, and give my opinions on how to allocate your CP when you haven't unlocked everything yet. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So firstly, I'll be going through my gear setup. This is 0-deal legal, no proc sets are used. I'm running 5-piece Crafty Alfiq, 1-piece Swarm Mother, 1-piece Domi, 2-piece Trainee, and 3-piece Ancient Grace. So the reason why I'm running so much max magicka is because it's always important to stack max mag on the Magsorc due to your shields scaling off max magicka only, and also because max magicka has dropped for Magsorc this patch. The average build has lost about like 3 or 4k max magicka, and damage is seriously over the roof this patch. Everyone is dealing so much damage, so it's more important than ever to stack max magicka, otherwise you're just going to die really fast on a Magsorc. So for my enchantments, I'm running all max mag on my armor pieces, and I'm running all tri-recovery on my jewellery. On my front bar, I'm running sharpened trait and double dot poisons. You can also choose to run immoved poisons. I think they're pretty good. I'm no longer running shock because I think double dot poisons are just better after the minor vulnerability nerf. And on my back bar, I'm running a frost staff with infused weapon damage. You can also choose to run a sword and board, but you will trade off a lot of damage because you are losing your ice staff light attacks as well as your infused enchantment proc for not as much defense. Like sword and board isn't really a huge difference in defense compared to ice staff, so I just recommend sticking to ice staff. You don't really need a resto because we're not running any skills from restoration stuff, and we don't really need to either. For my traits, I'm running 3 well-fitted and 4 impen. I think you need like at least a few well-fitted, but I also think that impen is very important this patch because there are quite a few nasty like crit focus builds out there. Like, I think you can definitely survive with 7 well-fitted because the additional dodge roll kind of makes up for the lack of impen. But if you're not sure what to do, a good setup to begin with is 4 impen and 3 well-fitted, and you can slowly adjust from there. And that is what I'm running right now. All arcane for the jewellery. So I'll be going through the alternatives now. So instead of 2-piece Trainee and 3-piece Ancient Grace, you can choose to run I don't have it right now, but you can choose to run 5-piece Amber Plasm. If you guys realize, 3 tri-recovery glyphs gives the same recovery as the Amber Plasm 5th piece bonus, so you can kind of swap it around. But if you are running Amber Plasm, then instead of Atro Stone, you have to run Major Stone, and you will still lose like about 2k max magicka once you equalize the mag recovery. But you will be 300 spell damage higher. But I still think that the max magicka is more important, so I'm sticking with the Ancient Grace plus Trainee setup instead of Amber Plasm. I used to run Amber Plasm, but I found that this setup is better. Doesn't have as much damage, but it has way more defense. And one more thing, you don't really need gold jewellery. It's not a big difference from just having purple in this case, since you are not running infused or bloodthirsty. For BGs, I highly recommend taking out one of these for talk, because talk is just infinite sustain. I will be running this if it wasn't for the restrictions. And if you are running talk, you can just run spell damage, or actually you can run Okay, if you are running Talk in a BG, you can run Mag Recovery on this and then swap your Atro Stone out for mages for more max magicka. You will still be over sustaining because Talk is very OP. And also if you are planning to run in a BG and use Talk, I recommend using Ancient Grace weapons. Otherwise, you will not be able to run your Talk in this setup. So get Ancient Grace weapons and then Crafty Alfiq or Trainee jewellery, because Ancient Grace only exists in jewellery or weapon form. So you definitely need the weapon if you are planning on running Talk. So I think that's all for the gear setup. Now I'll be moving on to the skill setup. So firstly, I'll be going through the front bar skills. The first skill is Boundless Storm. This is mainly for your defense and mobility, but the damage over time is also very important. Mainly it's used to proc your crit surge, which is your main form of healing. And since crit chance is quite low this patch, I think we only have like 30% crit chance fully buffed, 30 to 35% depending on your CP. So having a constant damage source to proc crit surge is more important than ever. You can also use the damage over time aggressively. You can use it to pull Nightblades out of stealth. And when I'm fighting other ranged players and even some melee players, I like to stay on top of them, like intentionally, even though I'm a ranged class, so I can use the damage over time to my advantage. Second skill is your Crystal Frags. This is your main burst ability. Try to fire it only when the proc is ready, but you can also use it with hard casting. You can use a combo like this, works as well, but it's mainly used with the proc. The third skill is Crushing Shot. This will be your main spammable. There are two reasons I use this over elemental weapon. The first reason why I'm using this is because it can interrupt enemies. In open world, there are a lot of situations where you have to stop a rest but you're not close enough, so having a range interrupt is very helpful. And the second reason is because it has a much higher chance of proccing your double dot poisons. Because Crushing Shot hits the enemy 3 different times, it has pretty much triple the chance of proccing your poison. Elemental weapon has its advantage. It desyncs people a lot. It desyncs their HP very easily when combined with Overload. And it's also better against dodge rollers, because even if they dodge your elemental weapon, they're still not safe. You can still use it for your follow-up attack. The next skill is Haunting Curse. This will be your second main burst. Your second main burst on top of Crystal Frags. Not much explanation needed. Just time the explosion together with a frag if possible for the most effect. The last skill is Flame Clench. It's my crowd control ability. A lot of people ask me why I use Flame Clench over Rune Cage, even though I do not have Master Inferno equipped. I still prefer Flame Clench more because it does damage all the time, unlike Rune Cage. So whenever I use Rune Cage, I feel like my damage is really low because I like the damage of Flame Clench. And another reason is also because Flame Clench has a much faster animation than Rune Cage. I feel like Rune Cage is a bit slow, and the CC always doesn't land in time, so that's why I prefer Flame Clench. But if you want, you can definitely run Rune Cage instead. And for my ultimate, I'm using Overload, using the Power Overload Morph. Overload is definitely the best ultimate to use on Magsorc, no matter what situation you are in, except for large scale battles. But this patch, there are a lot of alternatives that are also very good for Magsorc. The first one is Dawnbreaker. Dawnbreaker is actually a pretty good ultimate right now. The damage is quite high. It's comparable to Curse or even Frags. So you can definitely try this instead. You can also try Storm Atro. Storm Atro is also a very good ultimate. You can use it defensively. You can just line of sight around the Atro and just hide behind it. And you can also use Meteor if you are running Rune Cage. Meteor is a very nice ultimate to pair with unblockable CC like Rune Cage. And finally, you can even run Soul Assault. Like, I tried this ultimate just for fun, and I realized it's actually very overpowered in the right scenario. Like if you're fighting a medium armor build. Like even in this setup with no Master Inferno, the 2-tip of Soul Assault is almost 100k. And the 2-tip per tick of Soul Assault is almost the same as Curse. So it's almost like it's kind of like a frag machine gun in a way. It does a lot of damage. Like on the average player, it does 5k a tick. And it ticks every like 0.7 or 0.8 seconds. Very powerful in the right scenario. You can use it. It's quite fun to use as well. But if you want the most solid ultimate, I will go with Overload. Next, I'll be going through the back bar. The first skill is Dark Conversion. This is mainly for sustain, but it also makes for a good secondary heal. It's a pretty decent burst heal. Just try to cast it only when you have CC immunity up. Otherwise, it's going to cost you a lot if you get interrupted. The next skill is Ball of Lightning. This is probably one of the strongest skills for 1vx in the game right now. It gives you a lot of mobility as well as defense. And it can also be used offensively. So the distance you gain after you streak will give you some protection against melee players. And the Ball of Lightning will defend against ranged attacks. So it's kind of like a 2-in-1. You definitely will get like 1 to 2 seconds of breathing space after you streak to recover yourself. It also removes snare and immobilizers, so it's also very good for kiting Zergs to a better location. And one thing to take note is that the Ball of Lightning only starts absorbing projectiles that are cast after it appears. So you can still get hit by projectiles after you streak because they are already cast before. A good way to counter that is just to roll during or after you cast the skill. And as I said, it can be used offensively as well. What I like to do usually is to Ball of Lightning and then immediately turn an attack, because I know that I will have at least like a short time where I'm quite safe from attacks. So it gives me a small window to fight back, especially during like a high intensity 1vx situation. So it's a very good skill to use. Definitely recommend this over the Streak Morph. Even though the Streak Morph is also very good, still think this is better. Next will be your damage shields. You have Hardened. We are using 2 wards for Open World and BG. Hardened ward is the stronger one, so always cast this first before your Dampen Magic. Not much else to say. Crit Surge is your main form of healing, passive healing, and it also gives you your major sorcery. And lastly, I'll be going through the ultimate. I'm using Temporal Guard. It's a very good passive, and the active is also quite good if it works. But if you don't have access to Temporal Guard, that's fine as well. You can always slot a different ultimate like Barrier for the Mag Recovery. Or you can also slot another Magsorc ultimate. Like for example, if you are using Dawnbreaker front bar, you could slot Overload or Storm Atro back bar. You can also slot Storm Atro back bar and Overload front bar. Those are still very good combinations. Now I'll be going through everything else. For my attributes, I'm running all into Mag. For my Mundus, I'm running the Atro. Can't run the Mage because Mag Recovery isn't high enough on this setup. I'm using Sugar Skulls for my food. And I'm using 3 different potions. My main one is the Immove Pot that gives spell crit. And when I run into situations where I need a lot of sustain to survive, I will swap over to my tripods. And if I run into people who stealth a lot, I will swap to my Immove Pots. So having 3 different potions prepares me for all kinds of situations. And for my race, I'm a high elf. Still my favorite race for Magsorc PvP. Spell recharge is very underrated. The stem sustain is very good on the Magsorc, and the resist works when you are using dark conversion. And other than that, for my armor, I'm running 511, 5 light. Make sure to have your heavy piece as your chest piece to maximize your resistance. And I'm running 511 because you still need 5 light armor anyway to be able to use dampen magic. Without 2 shields, you are very squishy open world. And I'm using 511 just to maximize my max stats. Just remember to allocate points into all the passives because you no longer have 5-piece bonuses. And make sure to have points into agility. It might seem like a useless passive at first, but matter of fact, we actually have more weapon damage than spell damage on this setup. So that means that your ultimate will be scaling off your weapon damage and your max magicka instead of a spell damage. So let me just demonstrate real quick. So right now my negate 2 tip is 2006. And once I slot Dawnbreaker, which increases my weapon damage, you can see that my negate does more damage now. It works for all ultimates. All ultimates will scale off your highest stats. So don't ignore this passive. And finally, do not put points into tri-focus. You don't want your blocks on your back bar to cause magicka. That will make it very hard to sustain. And you don't really need the passive anyway. So I just don't put any points into this. And just remember to have all your other passives as well. All the relevant passives that you need. And that's all. I'll be going through to the CP now. So for my CP, I'll be going through it in this way. First, I'll go through the slotted passives and their alternatives. And then I'll be giving a list of all the relevant non-slotted passives and rank them in order of importance based on my opinions, so that you guys will have a rough idea of which passive to allocate first. So let's start with the blue tree. For the blue tree, I'm running Deadly Aim, Arcane Supremacy, Duelist Rebuff, and Resilience. This is in order of importance. And there are 2 passives that I think are worth trying over. The first one is Fighting Finesse. If you feel like you don't really need the crit resist, you're not struggling against crit builds this patch, you can try slotting more damage. It also helps a bit with your crit healing. Or if you feel like you're struggling a lot with AoE setups, like for example Necromancers, which are very strong this patch, you can try slotting Unassailable instead. And I think these are the only 2 alternative passives worth considering. So next up, I'll give here's the full list of all the relevant non-slotted passives in order of importance. So this is just a general guideline. You don't have to follow it by heart. You don't really have to max out one passive before moving on to the next. Like what I do is I try to spread it out. Like for example, I don't max out Tireless Discipline first before Precision, even though I think it's more important. So yeah, it's just a rough guideline on how you should allocate your points. Oh, and also make sure you try to max out your slotted passives first before you max your non-slotted passives, because slotted passives are usually more powerful. So that's just a little reminder. And now I'll be going through the red CP. I have Bastion, Survival Instincts, Juggernaut, and Rejuvenation in order of importance again. So Bastion is obviously very important for Magsorc. Definitely first priority. Survival Instincts is very useful because it pretty much gives you like a 25% cost reduction to all these abilities. Like status effects will almost always be up on you, so this has a very high uptime. You will probably get nerfed soon, So I'll be giving some alternatives later on. Next up is Juggernaut, even more resistance. You really need a lot of resistance this patch. Everyone is doing so much damage. And finally, rejuvenation for the sustain. So some alternatives you can run. The first one is arcane alacrity. I think this is what Malcolm uses. He's an EU Magsorc solo player as well. He uses it over survival instinct. It gives more cost reduction for your dodge roll compared to survival instincts. But for now, I still think survival instincts is better, especially if you are like me, you block a lot. It also affects your break free and your sprint. But if survival instincts get nerfed, which I think it will get nerfed soon, you can swap this out for arcane alacrity. Another alternative you can run is strategic reserve. I think this is very nice to use together with overload. Like, because when you're using overload, you tend to like stock your ultimate up a lot before unleashing your overload. So having this passive will give you a lot of passive HP regen, and it synergizes well as well because overload is a damage ultimate. So when you don't need the damage, you keep your ultimate and get extra regen, and once you need the damage, you just activate overload. Very simple. So very, very well-rounded ultimate. I kind of wish I have the slot for it, but I think rejuvenation is still better. Get more recovery. And I think that's all for the slotted passives. Don't really have any other alternatives. So let's move on. Oh yeah, there's one more. Peace of Mind. But I think this is just an inferior version of rejuvenation. So I will still prefer this. Okay, so here's the list of all the relevant non-slotted passives in order of importance again. So you guys can copy it down and use it as a rough guideline on how to allocate the points. Oh yeah, and this is by the way, for the red CP, this is just my personal preference. Like, for example, the reason why I put Tireless Guardian as the 3rd rank is because I block a lot. I block with almost all my attacks, so this benefits me a lot. But if you're the type of player that tends to roll a lot compared to block, you don't really need to put points into this first. You can focus on the other passives. And lastly, for the green CP, this is probably like the least important tree. Most of the passives here are like for role playing, but there's still a few good passives. So I think there are four passives that are useful for PvP. Steed's Blessing, which increases your movement speed out of combat. And then you have Gifted Rider and Wall Mount, which is very good for getting around Cyrodiil. And you also have Rationer, which is good for keeping your foot buff up. I think these are the only 4 passives that are relevant in PvP. I'm not using Wall Mount because I already have max stamp. I don't feel like I need more. I don't feel like I need the points in this passive. And I think there are also a few non-slotted passives which are very good. Yeah, Breakfall is probably the most useful one. Helps a lot in tower fights. Sometimes you accidentally fall off. This will most likely save you quite a few times. Steadfast Enchantment also works nicely. Don't have to recharge as much. And I think that's pretty much all of it. There isn't really any other like important passives you need. So that's all for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As usual, if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. The build is also in the description. Oh, and one more update. I started a Twitch channel a few months ago. If you guys do not know yet, I stream once a week, usually on the weekends or Fridays. Right now, I'm very busy in real life. I'm only free on the weekends. So I most likely won't have the time to do much 1vx videos anymore. I'll probably only make a 1vx video if I get a lot of really good clips, not just like normal 1vx's. So for now, I will stick to streaming on Twitch as my main content. So my channel link is in the description. Feel free to check it out if you have time. And that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video or the next stream.